Hi, good evening, everybody. Sorry I've been a little bit early again than my usual 7:30 time show, and again, it's partly because I've got the star of the show hanging out with me today. We've got a ever-growing daisy kitten here, and what I've been thinking about lately is a couple of things: patience and expectations. So, when people start to do something, anything to improve their lives, they oftentimes run into resistance in the form of old habits, friends, families, neighbors. All sorts of things can come up that can be a barrier to making changes for your health. And sometimes people have some expectations of they're going to start a new program and it's going to go easy and they're not going to have any problems and they're going to have this total life transformation in just a couple of days. And sometimes that works very well, and oftentimes though we have one form or another of resistance. After all, if you think about it, whatever life pattern you're in right now, there's usually a reason or more than one reason why you're doing that at the moment. For example, if you've got a donut pattern, then maybe the truth is that you really like the donuts, and so and there's something to be said for the addictive power of some of our favorite habits, as it were. And so, I just want to remind everybody that it does take some time sometimes to go through and when you're making a positive change, whether it's stopping smoking or eating a few more fruits and veggies, getting a little more exercise, getting a little more sleep, anything that you can think of that you are interested in modifying and improving or doing a little bit better at, then not only does it take some time to make the change and learn about whatever it is that you want to do and set a goal for yourself, but it does take some time to implement it, and sometimes people can slip a little bit backwards but then go a little bit forwards again. And sometimes when people slip a little bit, like for example, let's say that we have donuts as an example. If you are having a donut habit and one day you say, you know what, I really want to get away from these donuts, then one day you might be just maybe 3 weeks after you've given up the donuts, someone around you is bringing them into work, and then you look at that box of donuts and you say, ooh, I'm jonesing for a donut, I really want to get a donut. Well, sometimes your hand will just reach right on out and grab a donut out of that box, and you munch it and pop it in the mouth, and next thing you know, you have that bliss of the donut, and then guilt and something afterwards where you start to get back down on yourself and start saying, oh my gosh, I knew better. Why was I going after that donut? And sometimes we can beat up on ourselves quite a bit for going backwards from trying to make these lifestyle changes. And so my encouragement to you guys is that whenever you have a setback like that, don't let it destroy your patterns in wanting to improve, but let it just be another example of a way in which you can be gentle with yourself and say, oh, silly mind, you have this donut habit. Yep, I've changed my behavior a little bit, but the desire, the habit pattern hasn't quite changed yet. And so in that way you can start to train yourself a little bit more. And then next time that the box of donuts comes along, maybe that time, instead of just automatically reaching for the donut, perhaps you look at the box and say, oh, I really would like a donut, but you know what? Mind that desire for that donut, that's really not very good for you. We've been really working very hard on this beach body, got a couple of pounds on the butt that's getting ready to go away, for example. And the more that you feed this habit, the more the habit's going to just want to repeat itself, and then it's going to be harder to resist it the next time. And in such a way, you can use a little bit of self-dialogue, or kind of talking to yourself or talking to the mind through it. And then that way, you get a little more control over the habit, whatever it is that you want to improve on. And using donuts is a very silly example. But the same thing can happen with other things as well. It takes a while to develop some of these chronic diseases that I talk about in the other video presentations, and it can take a while for those diseases to be reversed as well. And sometimes people have an expectation that, all right, now I'm going to go out and eat a whole bunch of cherries and watermelon, and my pain is going to just poof, disappear right away. And yes, there's always the possibility that that might be a true statement. But in reality, it's a lot more likely that sometimes some of the berries and cherries and such can take down the edge of the pain, but it does take a while sometimes to get to the root cause of it. And usually with things like chronic pain, oftentimes things like physical therapy, stress reduction, better sleep, and all sorts of other things can make a much bigger impact over the long haul than just simply binging on cherries for a day or two and turmeric, and then saying, oh, these things didn't work as well. And so as you kind of get to know yourself and to learn about some of the ideas that are out there from the research and the science, then it can be very helpful to basically just observation of your habits. So as you learn to watch yourself, sometimes it becomes apparent that some of the habits that you might be doing already may be contributing or not contributing to your current health issues. Thank you. And so self-observation, I think, is a very key thing to improving health in general. Because through self-observation, you can basically be your own instructor. So as much as I love spending time with my patients, there comes a point where you have to say goodbye and you end up leaving, and I go on to the next person as well. And nobody is going to go follow you around your home and then say, oh, you know, that ice cream over there, that soda, maybe not so good of an idea. Maybe you need another kitten, you know. And so the real person who has the biggest impact on people's health is the person that's you know, looking yourself in the mirror every day, because those little subtle things, the things that only you are knowing about, are things that can make a big difference in your health. You know, how much are you exercising? How much sleep are you getting? Are you getting into worry patterns, for example? And a lot of people don't realize the impact that chronic stress and worrying can have on the body. Because when people start to become fearful and worry, the mind has a really good tendency to become very, very focused on one tiny little thing. And I've got this little cat chew toy as an example. Obviously, my fingers are a little more fun to chew on than the chew toy, which gets largely ignored here, but it's a good example. And so let's say this chew toy is something that I'm worried about. You know, it's a little spiky, it's got, I don't know, little funny things coming out the sides. Whatever it is, it's something that basically the mind starts to focus on. And so what ends up happening is, as the more that I dwell on or ruminate on or think about the little object, whatever it is of the worry, the bigger and bigger it appears. And so if I was to use my camera as an example, so I worry about it, I think about it, ooh, look at that, look at that. And basically, next thing you know, there's almost nothing else that you see other than the object of the worry. It's actually quite amazing how focused the mind can be sometimes on a negative thought. And I think that just really has to do with the self-preservation instinct that we all have. For example, if you know you're not worried at all about the tiger next door, then when the tiger comes out, he might have been eaten and maybe removed from the risk pool. But anyway, and so one of the things that I've learned from doing some years of meditation is finding out just how easy it is to sometimes let the mind go into the grooves of worry or rumination and basically lock onto a single thought and just kind of spin with it. And one of the things that's beautiful about meditation is as you practice techniques to calm the mind down and to settle the breath and to settle the nervous system and the body down, some of the mental patterns sometimes get apparent that might not have been as apparent. And in other words, a lot of times we've got hundreds of thoughts that are going through the mind. Some of them we're conscious of, and some of them are just kind of stewing around underneath the surface. And those subconscious ones are sometimes some of the ones that drive our actions and such more than we think, desires, fears, and the like. And by becoming more and more aware of, well, what are your thought patterns and habit patterns as far as these things go, it gives a little bit more of a choice as far as how to react to it. And if someone, for example, has the worry habit where they're just kind of used to focusing on something and it becomes the focus of the mind for a little while, then it can take a little bit of a shift to start to notice, oh, mind, you're starting to do that thing where you're looking at this one thought pattern or kind of spinning with the emotion, and maybe not just one thought, but usually when you get that one thought, a whole bunch of them kind of come along with it as well. Oops, there we go. And you end up kind of on a limb. I don't think we're going to do that famous example where the kitten's holding on for dear life with a little pause there. Hang in there, kitten. But basically, what can happen is if there's something there that you actually can start to break the thought pattern, and that internal dialogue technique whereby as you notice, oh mind, you're starting to get back into this thought pattern of whatever it happens to be that the mind is focused on, and asking at that time, is this useful, is it not useful? Sometimes that can be helpful, or just generally looking for, well, what's my expectation, what was the desire, or some other form of internal dialogue where you learn how to break that pattern. And sometimes people expect, oh my gosh, I'm going to have this internal dialogue experience. I'm going to ask my mind what's wrong with my meditation. I'm going to ask my mind, why is it focused on this negative thought? I'm going to ask my mind, show me these desires, or whatever it is that you happen to be trying to explore internally. And sometimes people think that it's going to be a sudden transformation. And generally speaking, with training the mind for learning how to settle things down for meditation, training the mind to change a habit pattern, training the mind for almost anything, usually does not happen overnight. Usually it takes a while to learn how to let go of an emotion, or to learn how to let go of a thought, and learn how to shift the focus as well. And generally speaking, one of the nice ways to shift the focus, generally speaking, is to focus on what do I want out of something, or what do I want in general. And sometimes as you start to think about what is it that you actually want, and if the mind starts to go, well, I want this, and then it starts to go bringing old habits of negative thoughts on board, then don't beat yourself up. I mean, just be very gentle with it and say, okay, well, yes, all that other baggage came along too, but redirecting the focus, and always remembering that the beautiful thing about humanity is that we were able to change the direction of our lives through the direction of our thinking. And so things that normally would get a person down sometimes will still get you down, but it might not get you down for as long or as deep, and you get a lot more bounce back from things in that way. And so it's very important to be able to if you're interested in inner exploration, of course, some people are and some people aren't. But whatever habit pattern you're looking to change, it's very, very important, I think, to learn to be gentle with yourself, because having an expectation that is so high, I'm going to leap over this big hurdle in one big bound, that might be great if you happen to have a good pole vault and an electronic something leaping you over it. But for a lot of us, even changing a habit pattern of maybe taking a new medication every day, it can take a while to get a new habit built around that. And then, sometimes people forget. And that's one of the reasons why when talking to people about medication compliance, for example, I'm doing this presentation right now on a lovely little cell phone, of course, and discovering the timers, the reminders and things on there. Sometimes the cell phones can be a wonderful reminder for people to help them with medication remembrance. And sometimes something as simple as tying a new habit to an old habit. For example, sometimes when I have young ladies that are having trouble remembering to take their birth control every day, and that's kind of an important one to take if you want to avoid getting pregnant. By the way, the risk of getting pregnant, I think, is about 20% per month for people that are fertile and not using it. So if you're of the inclination to want to use it, it's a very, very important thing to remember. Because it doesn't work when it's left on the shelf. But anyway, sometimes I'll give the people an idea that you brush your teeth every day, right? Well, take a rubber band, stick it to the pill container, and stick it to your toothbrush. And do I really mean that they're going to have their birth control pill stuck to their toothbrush for forever and ever? No, but it's just a simple, easy way of linking one habit pattern that's not quite there yet to something else that's really well established, and then by doing that, it makes it a lot more easy to stay regular with a new habit pattern on there. And so expectations are vitally important, because if you have a very high expectation right off the bat, then it's going to be very easy to get disappointed. It's going to be very easy to get frustrated with the whole process. And I think that might be part of the reason why doctors in general don't necessarily set such lofty expectations for their patients. I mean, we would talk about realistic goal setting, for example. And it might also be why a lot of times doctors don't necessarily talk as much about what is the healthiest goal for exercise or the healthiest goal for fruit and vegetable consumption, because they figure, boy, if I tell people to eat 9 servings of fruits and vegetables per day, which is one of the things the American Cancer Society was recommending recently, for reduced risk of cancers, nobody's going to do that. So I think I better just tell them, try to go for 5 a day, maybe do one more than you usually do or something. Because it's true that in some of these realms, anything is better than nothing. 10 minutes of movement is better than no movement, for example. It kind of sells people a little bit short, because if they never even hear what should the goal be, or what should the best thing be for longevity or health or something, then they never even think to set it for themselves as well. So there's some sort of a balance in there, and that's one of the reasons why I so much adore Dr. Greger's work with nutritionfacts.org and Dr. Barnard's with the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, and his work at the Nutrition MD, as well as Dr. Ornish's and others, because partly they really like to tell it as it is. There's not a lot of sugarcoating and weakening of the science just because they think that nobody's going to do it. And I kind of agree with them in the sense that if you never tell anybody, they're not even consider going as far as they might for their health and wellness and such. And so, again, patience is vital. I've got a good friend who recently was talking about his diabetes, for example. And so when we first went on with the plant-based no add oils kind of program, sure enough, the A1C went from 8 all the way down to less than 5.7. So effectively, functionally, the diabetes got reversed fairly early on. And then over the years, basically it started kind of creeping up slowly. Still less than 6.5, so still very well controlled. But you got to remember, sometimes you got to go a couple steps backwards in order to go forwards again. So rather than throwing up their hands and saying, oh my gosh, it just didn't work, how terrible, blah, 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 it's a sense of, oh, okay, well, something didn't quite work out as well recently. Oh, what's different? Oh yeah, I forgot about amla powder, gosh, that sort of thing. And the idea is that sometimes a little bit of self-reflection sometimes can find some clues. For example, with folks with migraine headaches, this is another area where self-reflection and self-observation can be very, very, very useful for identifying some of the triggers for headaches. And some of the most common triggers are food and lack of sleep and stress. A lot of people don't realize just how big of an impact stress has on the nervous system. A very big cause of stress is having a desire, and sometimes you know about the desire, sometimes you don't, and basically being in a situation where that desire chronically is not being met or is being frustrated and such. And so that's another area in which self-observation and self-reflection and basically getting to know yourself, know your environment, know what are your habits, and so forth, can do a lot of detective work and can be very, very helpful in helping you navigate the healthcare system and talking with your physician about your medical problems. Because as much as I love you guys, certainly there's a big difference between seeing somebody in the clinic for about 10-15 minutes, maybe longer if we happen to have a longer appointment slot set up, and then all the rest of what is happening in your world can be much, much bigger of an impact on your health and wellness. So of course, I'm always going to try to share with you guys the best of what I've learned, the best of what I've known, and giving you guys the references to the sources where I get a lot of the information from, generally speaking, so that you can take some of these ideas, and if you want to play with them, and then go ahead and bring the information back to your own primary care physician, and then that way the two of you can have a dialogue and share what you've learned. So, alrighty, Daisy Kitty, I think she's about there. Does anybody have any questions of the ones that are happen to be joining us with the Facebook Live right now? Or alrighty. So, again, I will see you guys later. One of these days I'll probably get back to my regular show time of 7:30. But I will see you guys again next week. Have a great week and some great self-observation. I hope you guys learned something a little about what you're doing. And remember, just be very gentle with yourself. I mean, this kitten's not going to grow into a full-grown cat in one day, and sometimes it can take quite a bit of time to grow and to learn and discover and to find out for yourself what are the keys for health in your own world. Alrighty. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.